Okay, Chapter 16, Introduction to Ancient Rome. Rome is on the Tiber River, about 16 miles inland. It's the closest place to the coast where you could ford the river, so it was important for transport north and south. Also, it was navigable to about 27 miles inland, and they would bring salt up to use salt in the interior, so east, west, north, south. It was a fundamental node for transportation in Italy. Italy itself, we have the Apennine Mountains extending along like this, some 600 miles down to the toe of Italy, sort of separating the east coast from the west coast. And then we have the Alps kind of serving as a barrier to migration from the outside, although the Gauls moved in here and took over the Po River Valley. The Etruscans supposedly migrated at the end of the Bronze Age, and this is Etruria is the Roman era name for the Etruscans. They controlled the entire west coast. They built an empire around 580 BC. All other states, including Rome, were subject to the Etruscans during this archaic period. The Italian peoples came in sometime during the Dark Ages, and they settled along the mountains. There were various dialects. We have the Samnites right here. And we have the Latins, those who spoke Latin dialect of Italian, which was Indo-European. And Rome is one of many, several, 10, 12 Latin states. And then we have Greek colonists that came in and settled along the southern part of Italy. Tarentum was the colony of Sparta. Campania, Neapolis, this is another region. As well as the eastern part of Sicily. So Greeks over here. And then last we have the Carthaginians. Here's Carthage right here, and they controlled western Sicily as well as Sardinia and Corsica. And so what we can say is, two big things about Italy. It's not as rugged as Greece. Perhaps as much as 45 to 50% of the land mass is arable, agriculture. So it could produce larger populations. Italian armies tend to be in the order of 10 to 20,000 men. In Greece, these hoplite phalanxes were 3 to 5,000. So there's a difference in scale, which means the political map here is going to take longer to work itself out. In addition, Italy was more diverse, highly diverse, with all these different ethnic elements. And so maybe the Romans were a little more sort of open to dealing with outside peoples than in Greece, where notions of identity with a particularism was so central to the Greek thought. The Romans, what we like to say is their success was a process of incorporating outsiders gradually and by degrees. They didn't do it willingly, and it took time. But over time, the face of Rome changed. Outsiders came in and assumed Roman status. And it's almost as if the Romans had a process of foraging further and further abroad for talent, the best and the brightest, to bring in. And this is what really sustains the Roman Empire from 500 BC all the way to 476 AD. It's this willingness to incorporate outsiders gradually and by degrees. Very, very different than the Greek perspective in that regard. All right, so populations of Italy were highly diverse. In Rome itself, we see back to sort of primitive pastoral populations that the patriarchal family remained the basis of social organization in Rome throughout most of its history, and was exemplified by the tria nomina, the three Roman names, is the prenomen, the first name, the family name, or the nomen, or the gentilicium, and then there was this heraldic epithet. So look at that discussion, because it really helps to understand how Romans were named. Rome originated as a city-state ruled by kings, but the Roman populace successfully transited from a small-town monarchy to an oligarchic hierarchy that derived its authority from elections conducted among free-born, property-holding male citizens. The conflicts that inherently arose between nobles and commoners, urban artisans and rural farmers, rich aristocrats and poor laborers, was negotiated through a gradual process of political invention and innovation. In 510 BC, the aristocracy rebelled from the kings and expelled the last Etruscan king, Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud. Patrician aristocrats, and patricians are all those who could claim descent from members of the council of the kings. The council was known as the Senate, so the elders of all the great families. Anybody whose ancestors were in the Senate of the kings were patricians. Everybody else was out. You were plebeians, ordinary people. Plebeians really meant orphan stepchildren of Rome, because they couldn't claim descent from the aristocratic families and from the gods. Julius Caesar claimed descent from Venus and Mars, for example, and patrician. And the patricians declared themselves a republic and carefully transferred the power of the king to new annually elected magistrates. And there's three you need to know. There is the consuls, the annually elected chief magistrates of Rome. They conducted the executive, they held the elections in the assembly, they convened the Senate, and then they would go off and command the Roman army with imperium, which was the power to command Roman armies. The highest office you could hold in Rome. There's the dictator, which was an emergency office that had to deal with the struggle of the orders. And so somebody appointed dictator was basically king for 6 months, but it expired after 6 months. The dictatorship was to assume responsibility, absolute authority for 6 months to reorganize the republic so that then the government could proceed. And then there's the plebeian tribunes, who were the elected appointees of the non-patrician people in the struggle of the orders. Patricians' dominance over the electoral process was resisted in 494 BC by plebeian leaders who formed their own assembly and offices, the 10 annually elected plebeian tribunes. Compromise led to the development of dual polity, two governments existing simultaneously in the city of Rome. The cural magistrates, elected by the military assembly, this is the consuls and lower magistrates, and the plebeian magistrates, the 10 tribunes, elected by the plebeian assembly. Gridlock between these two simultaneously existing governments was prevented by the influence of the Senate. All ex-magistrates entered the Senate for life. So to get in the Senate, you had to run for office and get elected a year, and then you entered the Senate. And these senators were the most powerful politicians of the society, and so they could bring pressure to bear on the current magistrates this way. Plebeians obtained access to all elected offices over time. This is the struggle of the orders, roughly 494 to 287 BC. And eventually they formed part of the aristocracy, so we call it a mixed aristocracy, a patricio-plebeian aristocracy, based on what offices your family had held in the past. The nobility was replaced by a consular nobility. To be a consular noble, somebody in your family had to have been elected to the highest ranking office at Rome at some point in its history. And thus nobility was recognized according to rank, most particularly by the ability of members of certain families to obtain the office of consul. Roman senators and their constituents existed in a relationship of mutual dependency known as the patron-client relationship. Although hereditary, this relationship needed to be renewed through mutual exchange of favors with each rising generation. Roman aristocrats perceived their families as organic entities, pyramidal tents that had the potential to expand indefinitely at the base. The Romans incorporated outsiders into their systems. And family in Rome did not mean blood-related family. Family is sort of like blended families. Notions of incorporated people, including ex-slaves, could become parts of the family. Dual polity was an unusual political form that harbored numerous risks. However, the strength of the Roman family system and the willingness of Roman leaders to incorporate outsiders gradually and by degrees furnished the Roman state with the necessary flexibility to grow in size and to respond to a number of challenges.